Now it's like, well, the Citadel's up at Western Carolina. That used to be, pretty much a dead zone for us. And now we have, we just go and record the game and, cut together 30 to 40 seconds. And that allows us to keep the viewers who aren't on social media, and they still just rely on the rabbit ears. For that way, it helps us keep those people up to date with what's going on at these college levels and the pro levels as well.
Welcome into the newest edition of the Sports Prod Pod. As usual, I'm your host, Nick Case, alongside Dennis Trapani and Alex Souza. Joining us today, a very special guest. He is the sports director at Live 5 News here in Charleston. He's also the inspiration for Champ Kind from Anchorman. He is Kevin Bilodeau. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
I have way better hair, though. I want that to be clear.
You have Ron Burgundy hair.
Best of both worlds for me.
Yeah, Kevin, I've known you for quite a while. Dennis has known you for quite a while, and it's really cool to have you on the show.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. You guys are doing great work here.
You're just saying that. You've never heard of this before.
That's not true. I've heard of it.
You've heard of it?
Yeah.
I probably talked about it at a River Dogs game one night, and that's it.
I think you followed me on TikTok or something, and I was like, what is this?
Yeah, we have a TikTok now, so go ahead and follow. So Kevin, you've been around quite a bit. Couple different stops: Scottsbluff, Nebraska, Midland, Texas. Now in Charleston for quite a while. And when you're looking at the sports world, we tend to focus on the production side of things, what we do for ESPN, Mountain West Network, whatever freelance company will come along and do our stuff. But the sports anchor is actually a pretty vital part of what also goes into a sports production side. How do you approach the day-to-day in terms of looking at what you're going to put on your segment for sports at 6 or 11 or what have you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it changes, not just day by day, but really, I guess I would just say all the time, because, when I first got here, we focused a lot more on the professional stuff. And here in Charleston, we've got the Battery, the minor league soccer team, and the Stingrays, an ECHL hockey team, and the River Dogs. And, it was a lot of college as well, mostly South Carolina and Clemson. But really, I'd say the last 4 or 5 years, we're really starting to just focus more on the high school stuff, because I'm just noticing as I put more stuff on social media and on our website, that's just really what's drawing people more. And, part of that is that, the colleges have such solid sports departments on their own now. It used to be, 15 years ago, if you could put something from the College of Charleston on the website or Charleston Southern, it would get a lot of hits because that was the only place people could go to see it. Now they can just go right to the CSU website or the CFC website or whatever it may be, and they can find way more stuff there than we have time to do here. So it's really evolved, and it evolves all the time. But yeah, that, the main part is what's going to get the most people to tune in, what's going to get the most people to click. And, that's the main thing we look at each day when we're trying to draw things up.
Yeah, I was always surprised when I would do the high school football games of the week. I don't know what the ratings look like, but you would look at the live stream and it was jumping, because it was the chance for the parents or the aunts or the uncles or the grandparents to hop online, hop on Facebook, hop on YouTube, and get to see their kid, their grandkid, their niece or their nephew. And it was really fascinating. An aspect I never really thought about. I don't have kids, so I never really thought in that aspect of this is their chance to really see these kids that they are in Georgia, they're in Mississippi, they're in where have you. And it's their opportunity to see their family member when they haven't had that chance.
Yeah, I always thought that was interesting because, they would do the live broadcast of the high school game. And, you think like, who's going to watch that, at least here in town? Because if you're here in town, you're going to go to the game if you care about it. But the big thing is you get it on that website, you get it on a stream. And like you said, people from out of town who want to see the nieces and nephews that they don't get to see enough, they want to get a chance to see what they can do when they're playing their game or whatever. So that's a big part of it. I don't know how good the ratings are, like you said, but the streams, I think it feels like that's where the money is to be made, is in the streams.
And I feel like that ties to an argument that I know Dennis and I heard a lot, and then I'm sure Sue's heard a lot. is once we were transitioning over to that streaming age of no, we can't do this because we want people in the building. People got to be in the building. If they're here, they got to be in the building. And I feel like it's kind of crossing that stream of consciousness of, well, people can watch this now wherever in the college area. So now it's the high school's turn to deal with that, but it's becoming, even on the high school level, acceptable to put it on because, well, people are going to come, but not everybody can come.
Yeah, definitely. There's still some old school coaches who I know are going to fight it tooth and nail because they just see it as dollars and cents. And if someone doesn't come to the game, that's $5 or $10 they're not getting for their athletic budget for the next week. So, they're going to fight it tooth and nail. But I think the younger coaches that are starting to come up now, they see it too. And it's not just that people can see it, but they can take that recording and send it to coaches when they're trying to get their kids recruited. They can let other high schools see it and see what they're doing. And, when kids start moving around, and as it's going to get more and more, you're going to see, not necessarily a transfer portal at the high school level, but you're going to see more kids jumping around and have more freedom to do that. They can send these videos to those kids and they can get a sense of what they could be going into if they're going to change to that high school.
Kevin, how have, like Nick said, because Nick and I are both old at this point, we went through that initial, and Suze did too. I know he did. We went through that initial, hey, you're costing us ticket sales by streaming this. And not only that, but by doing a really good job with it. I know at CFC, we heard that all the time, mm-hmm. But, at least at the college level, in my experience here at Wyoming, we're starting to use that to drive revenue now. We're selling ads, we're selling player of the game, we're selling play of the game, we're selling keys to the game, all these little things that it's kind of the RSN model, that you would see, maybe, Fox Sports Pittsburgh do back in the day, Nick, or Fox Sports Rocky Mountain when it was still around for the Rockies and stuff like that. How have you seen, Kevin, have you seen that at the high school level yet? Is that starting to kind of form there a little bit?
We're getting there. And I got a call from my general manager on Monday, and he was saying, what high schools broadcast their own games so that we can start to take that and maybe put it on our channel. Cause we have a separate network here in Charleston called the Palmetto Sports and Entertainment Channel. And it just started, at the beginning of this year. And it's, my company is Great Communications, and it's the 4 channels that they own in South Carolina that kind of run everything. And, they broadcast River Dogs games and Columbia Fireflies and Battery. And, most of the pro teams now in the state will put their games on that channel, whether they do it live or pre-recorded at a later point. And now they're starting to think, especially this time of year when there's just not much going on, they're like, well, what else can we put on there? And I think they're starting to get we could just throw some high school games on here. And, even if we don't show it live, we could show it the next afternoon and people will still go home and watch it. And, if it's online, people will still click on it at some point to tune in and check it out. So I definitely think they're starting to get that. Yeah, this is the next step, and high schools, especially the bigger high schools, that's going to be where it is. That's the next step. That's the next big thing, I think.
These high schools that are cranking out their own broadcasts with their own programs, and there's one right down the street from me at Fort Dorchester High School. How is that influencing the level of intern that you guys are getting?
It depends. Mostly for high school, we don't really take high school kids. It actually started, I guess, a couple years ago where Gray started paying all the interns, which is a great thing. And so, not only now do they get paid, but now they have to be getting college credit as well. So that helps a lot. And the other thing is, 15, 20 years ago when I was here, we would get interns in and they would just sit in the corner and they would, we'd have them log a Braves game during the summer so that we would go out to dinner and be like, all right, what happened when, okay, Chipper Jones hit a homer and, Ron Gann hit a double and that, cut that. All right, great. That's what they would do for the day. And now, the interns who come in now, they hand them a camera and the car keys and say, there's a story break, go get it. So not quite from the high school level, but the college level, we're definitely expecting more out of these kids now when they come in. And, it's partly money and it's partly just that they're learning more at this level. But, when I got here, like you said, this was my 3rd job in television, was coming here to Live 5 in Charleston. Now we're just hiring kids out of college and, they don't have the experience level that I had or that the people who were here when I started had, but, they're getting thrown right into the fire. And for for the most part, it's a lot of sink or swim. That's the funny thing I'm seeing now is people either pick up on it right away and they do pretty well at the job right off the bat, or they realize quickly this isn't for them and they drop out pretty quick.
Yeah. All right. So, Kevin, you mentioned kind of adjusting to like the high school game and things like that. How has your content itself, the type of content, how has that changed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely way more high school now. It used to be, except for football, every other high school sport we kind of ignored until they got to the postseason. And even then, it would be like, all right, it's lower state finals. Now we'll start to cover volleyball or even basketball. We didn't really cover until it got till midway through the postseason and stuff like that. Baseball was the same way. And now, I just noticed that I can go and get 3 high school games in a night as opposed to staying at, one college game for the entire night. And those 3 high school games, when I put them on social media, they're going to get between 5 and 10,000 views, by the next day. And the college games get, maybe 1 to 3,000 if I'm lucky. So, I try not to base everything on social media. I know that the college games still have viewers and fans that want to see that stuff, but I know for the most part that they can't see the high school stuff anywhere else. Even that used to be the big thing here was that, we had smaller colleges here between CSU and CFC and the Citadel, and they couldn't see those highlights on Sports Center. So that's why we posted those a lot. But now, like I said, through the school's own production departments, they can see them right there on the school website. So we still cover those games a lot, but we try to work just way more high school stuff into it now, because I think that's stuff that you can't see anywhere else if you're a parent, or especially if the kid, as my Twitter following still continues to grow every day, because I get more and more high school kids. And the funny thing is I get so many high school kids from out of our market who just follow me just because I think they see that a lot of coaches are following me too, and they want to see if they can get the coach's attention, if I'll retweet their highlights, which I usually don't, but just in case. But it's still a lot of attention. So we just focus way more on the high school stuff, which is why this time of year, as we hit end of June and July, we're just it feels like we're treading water until beginning of August when football practice starts again.
You mentioned your social media. I'm curious because I know how it's changed our world at the college level. How has it changed yours?
God, it's just changed everything. I mean, when I first started here, we barely had a website. I think it was a year or two into my time working at Live 5 that they really got serious about having a website and us posting the stories on it. And, at first they were just like, yeah, just copy and paste from whoever you see and post it on. And now I'm just like, God, I can't believe that was the advice they gave. I was like, that's so illegal now. We would get into all kinds of trouble. But yeah, between that and, like I said, the reach is just so much wider with social media. So there's that. And, I'm very active on social media. I know Nick knows that, and Dennis knows that as well. And it's a fine line because I always want to be entertaining and funny on that stuff, but I try not to be too what's the word, not dramatic, but I try not to ruffle too many feathers, I guess. So it's really just a fine line you got to toe. And I've seen a lot of people who are work very hard in this business and do a lot of good work. I've seen them go down in flames because they say the wrong thing on social media or they put the wrong thing on social media. And it's just such a fine line. So as much as I love doing it and I'm on it all the time, every day, I'm just like, all right, we got to be careful. And I really try to double check everything I post to make sure, something I'm saying won't be misconstrued at least too badly by someone who's looking at it.
So when you get to the broadcast side, you said that the impact of ESPN and ESPN Plus and these things have changed the way your job is done now, focusing more on high school. How does our job help you?
Yeah, I mean, it allows it so that we don't have to be everywhere. It used to be if we didn't get to a game, then that was it, and we weren't going to have highlights. It would be a scoreboard, and that's all we would talk about for the game that night. And now it's like, well, the Citadel's up at Western Carolina. That used to be, pretty much a dead zone for us. And now we have, we just go and record the game and, cut together 30 to 40 seconds. And that allows us to keep the viewers who aren't on social media, which, isn't many, but especially I think in our market, there's still some people that, not only aren't on social media, but there's some people that still don't have cable and don't do streaming, and they still just rely on the rabbit ears and keep it as basic as they can. And, for that way, it helps us keep those people up to date with what's going on at these college levels and the pro levels as well.
Yeah, in a previous episode, when he was in Omaha, Sue said he was basically acting as a de facto bridge for the media that really couldn't do anything in terms of getting out daily updates. And how useful is something like that?
Oh, I mean, it's through the roof. And, it's a blessing and a curse too, because, it used to be we could go to these games, especially not necessarily the World Series, but when they would have the regionals, in Columbia or Clemson, we could go and we could shoot those games and we could do everything ourselves and get the video ourselves. And now, because of ESPN contracts, that's a strict no shoot. And you've got to take the feed from them. If you're there, you could take it from them on site and stuff like that. But, they don't allow you to shoot those games. And even, some of the bowl games, in college football, I think one of the last big ones I shot was the Orange Bowl. When Clemson played Ohio State back when Sammy Watkins and Taj Boyd had that comeback win in that game. I was in the end zone for that game. I shot the whole thing. Drake stood right behind me. I had no idea who he was. All kinds of people were freaking out. And I was like, why is everyone yelling? And they're like, Drake's behind you. I was like, oh, okay. Don't know what that means, but
still pretty scary though.
Yeah. Now, yes. But I was just like, okay, but here comes, Sammy Watkins coming right at me. And now, because that was the Orange Bowl, that's definitely a game we wouldn't be able to. Well, I wouldn't even be on the sidelines for that game now. They would have us in a room somewhere down the street from where the stadium is, and just bus us in to get post game reaction.
Don't worry, we hate it too.
Mm-hmm. I think the first time I remember it was right when ESPN had bought the rights to the NIT. And before that, that was never a big deal. It's like, yeah, we're going to shoot basketball. What's the big deal? And I drove to Columbia because South Carolina was hosting Davidson. And that was Steph Curry's last year at Davidson. And so we were going to go. And, basically the story for me was not only get, the South Carolina side of things, but we wanted to kind of build our Steph Curry file and make sure we had a lot of Steph Curry video for the future. And as soon as I walked in, they were like, you don't need to bring your camera in here. You're not allowed to shoot. And I was like, well, why not? They're like, when did this start? They're like, new contract said you can't shoot the game. It was in the email we sent you. I was like, well, who the hell reads the email? What's that about? So that's kind of the first time I remember that.
You mentioned going to the Orange Bowl. I know you've gone to some bigger events, and Alex was fortunate enough to go to Omaha. I haven't had the opportunity to do some big events. Dennis has done some Broncos playoff games. What are the pinch me moments for you?
Well, I mean, number one is the Super Bowl in Atlanta, not just because it was the Super Bowl, but it was because the Patriots, the team I grew up rooting for, were playing in the Super Bowl, and it was Tom Brady's last Super Bowl with the Patriots, and just roaming around right outside the locker rooms. It was my favorite story of that day was. It was, a couple hours before the game, and I'm just hanging out outside the Patriots locker room because I had the pass. And I'm right next to Chris Berman, and Berman has a guy next to him. I think it was his nephew or something. And Bill Belichick walks out of the locker room and comes over, gives a big handshake to Berman, and they're talking for a minute. And I'm just sitting there taking pictures with my phone and having a grand old time. And Berman kind of looks my way. He's like, I want to introduce you to this guy. And I was like, oh my God. I'm going to meet Bill Belichick right now before the Super Bowl. And it was his nephew that he was introducing. And the nephew stepped in between us and shook Bill's hand. And I was like, yeah, that's who you wanted to say. I was like, this isn't awkward at all. Sorry. So, but yeah, so that was a pinch me moment, seeing the Patriots win that was just really cool. A lot of really good college football games, a couple national championship games under my belt now, seeing Clemson win that first one against Alabama and then another one against Alabama. And I really had fun the game in New Orleans when LSU beat Clemson. That was it wasn't a great game. I think LSU pretty much smoked them in that game, but being able to be, I'd never been to New Orleans. That was a bucket list city for me. And then getting to go down Bourbon Street after that game when it was absolutely berserk. And, people were just everywhere you could see, and just getting to kind of walk around that and see what a celebration was like. That was really cool for me as well.
What are some of your favorite stories in market that you've got to do, like in Charleston?
Oh, let's see. There was one several years ago, probably about 15 years ago now, but we had a pitcher for the River Dogs was ambidextrous. So, he had one of those gloves where he could switch hands in between batters, and he would throw righty and lefty. And he was a really cool guy. And, we got to walk. That's just always one that's kind of stuck out to me. So that was really fun. And, a lot of the ones that stick out are more of the tragedy stories as well. Unfortunately, we just had the anniversary of 10 years from the Charleston Mother Emanuel shooting. And, everything we had to do after that, that's a situation where, sports kind of takes a back seat for a good time after that. We didn't do sports much after that, except for, one of the kids who had his mother died was Chris Singleton, who was a baseball player over at Charleston Southern. And, we talked to him the next day, and that was a really emotional thing. And, right before that as well, we had the Charleston 9 firefighters who died in there was a Sofa Superstore fire, and 9 Charleston firefighters died. And one of them was an assistant coach at one of the high schools here up in Somerville. And he was I think he was the JV basketball coach, and he was assistant on the varsity team. And then that following year, that team went on and won the state championship. So that was just an amazing kind of way to wrap up that whole story. And, we still see that every year. That's one of the anniversaries we commemorate every year as well. So those are the ones that stick out right away.
Kevin, talk a little more about that. It's a unique thing especially for a sports person, when the X's and O's stop mattering, I guess. What is your mindset in a situation like that?
Yeah. When I was in college up in Hartford, I interned at the NBC station there, NBC 30. And one of the sports people there was Samantha Ryan, who, I don't know if you guys remember, she worked for MLB Network for a while, and she worked a bunch of stations in New York as well. She was a super sweet lady. And I was working there the day John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane crashed. And, him and his wife, and I think it was his sister-in-law, they were all on the plane, and they all passed away in the plane crash. And I remember I was in the sports office that day, and, she was going back and forth with news. She was like, "What do you want us to do? What's my role in here?" And they were like, "We're giving you a minute. Just, do what you got to do." And she came down and she was just like, "Hey, at this time," she's like, "this is the time. We're not making jokes. We're not being funny. We're just getting out there. We're getting the information out." She's like, "We're showing 2 sets of highlights and we're done. Just say goodnight and get out of this, because nobody's going to remember what we do. Nobody's going to remember we're talking about Mets highlights, from this day." So she's like, "Just get in and out and do what you got to do." And the crazy thing is that as this has evolved, as I've been in this business longer and longer, it kind of comes to the sports people a lot when they're, especially, we get storms down here every year, whether it's hurricanes, tropical storms, all that kind of stuff. As soon as that happens, I get the call that, "Hey, you're going to go stand in the storm for 12 hours. So good luck." And part of that is because, I'm so adaptable to just doing everything. I know how to work the camera. I can hold a tripod. I can base everything down. And if nothing else, when we're doing those storm coverages, especially when it's bad storms like a hurricane, we're wall to wall. We're not taking commercials. We're just going usually, 2-hour blocks at a time. And they know that usually sports guys are someone that you can just throw in front of the camera and they can talk for 5 minutes straight, and it's going to sound, not awful. It's going to sound reasonable because we have learned, from going to games, just talk about what you see. And, if you see a person there, just grab them real quick and just talk to them for a minute. Even if it's not on camera, just have a conversation with them really quick and, kind of get what they're feeling and what they've been through that day. And you can pass that story along. So yeah, it's really important, and it's one of the things I'm very proud that I'm able to do, and that they appreciate that I can do that. Is when they just throw me out there. One of my bosses once said, she was like, I really enjoy having you out there for these storms because you look so miserable all the time. And she's like, but that's the way it should be. She's like, we throw these young kids out here, and they're so excited to be doing something different and to be standing in a storm and having their Jim Cantori moment. She's like, but you've done this for long enough where, you kind of put across that this isn't a fun thing to be doing. This isn't fun. It's dangerous. And it's a pain right now to be doing this. She's like, and it really comes across when you're out there doing this. And I was like, well, I'm glad my misery can provide some joy to some people.
That's also why I enjoy you being out there. So
the amount of memes that are passed around the station of me just sour faced, just standing in a pouring rain. And usually, I won't bring a raincoat or something just because I'm just like, I want to show how bad this is. I don't, the raincoat, it's going to bounce off. But if I'm sitting there soaked, I'm not just going to stand there for 2 hours. We jump in and out of the car or whatever. But I want them to see how wet it is out there. And, I like to walk in the big puddles and, show that the water is up to my knees or even higher sometimes. And it's always funny because we're telling people not to do that specifically. And I'm just like, well, I'll just do it real quick. And they'll get a sense of what we're talking about at least.
It's not misery. It's authenticity. That's the word we're looking for.
It's probably both.
Yeah.
As someone that's met Jim Cantori, I can say that you are very analogous to Jim Cantori. So
we're throwing big words around now. Great.
Yeah. Well, I guess, is there anything about our positions that has made your job worse? You said how it's made your job easier. You can hit us up for highlights if you need to be somewhere else. Is there anything about our positions that have made your job worse?
Nothing about your positions. I mean, you guys are always great. It's sometimes the crews are pretty inexperienced, and I've had times, especially at football games where a cameraman will just walk right in front of you, and sometimes they'll just literally stop right in front of you I really try not to be rude. I'll just tap them on the shoulder. I'll be like, excuse me, like there's other people working here too. And 99 times out of 100, they're very apologetic. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. I'm just one head in the clouds here, but every now and then you get like someone who's like, I don't care. I'm the production here, and this is, it's my job to be here. And it's like, okay, that won't come back and bite you at all. I'm sure that'll work out really well for you in the future. I can actually tell you one story. I think the statute of limitations is passed on this one. I was in Daytona one year covering the 500. It was the 50th anniversary of the Daytona 500. And the way it works down there is you get there during the week, and they have risers set up on Victory Lane. And you get there during the week, and you put a piece of tape down on the spot you want for the whole week. And you put your call letters there, and that's your spot for the whole week. So we had a photographer go down a couple days early and claim our spot. And when I got there, we were going to do my first live shot from the week on a Wednesday, and someone had taken up our piece of tape and thrown it away and put their own tape down there. And we're going back and forth. We like, we claimed this spot on Tuesday, and they're like, well, this is always our spot, and everyone knows that. It was a station from Indianapolis, and we're trying to talk to the guy from Daytona, and he's like, guys, I'm sorry. He's like, if you didn't take a picture of it, he's like, I can't know that you were really there. So you guys are just going to have to take another spot. And so the second photographer I had, who is a great guy, but he could be a loose cannon every now and then, he was just like, okay. He's like, guess that's how it's going to be. Okay. All right, guys, good luck with that. And the next day, the same station from Indianapolis, they're running around. They're like, how is the shot not working? What happened? What went wrong? They're like, what? Our wire got cut. How did the wire to the truck get cut? It's so crazy. Like, how does a wire just get cut like that? It was, one of those really big, thick wires that plugs right into the satellite truck. And the photographer's just like, oh, that's a shame. Karma got him, I guess. And I was like, yeah, I guess karma did get him. And then years later, he was like, oh no, karma was me. He's like, I went and cut their wire. That was-
Oh, it's so great and so evil all at the same time.
Yeah.
We're all kind of cringing just because doing broadcasts now as much as we do at colleges, like we've all had those moments. I had our obviously we've gone a lot to IP and Dante and things like that, and our mascot actually before a basketball game this year, after the team run out, we had shot the open. We were in the open actually. They're doing the run out. Well, the mascot goes to put the flags away and just completely wipes one of the switches out that is controlling our entire announce booth and our slam cam on that side. And all of a sudden, everything's dead. And my phone's ringing. We're playing the open. My phone is ringing, and it's the play-by-play guy. Because, with Dante, there's like no pop. Like there's nothing, no cable getting pulled out, right?
right.
He goes, hey, we lost you guys. Like everything's dead at the table. And I don't know how, somewhere in between a 2.5 minute open and a 2.5 minute commercial break, one of the guys on my staff ran down and immediately realized what it was and plugged everything back in. No one at home ever knew. But
but it gave you a nice little heart attack, right?
Yeah. Oh, it did. It did. I probably lost years off my life. That's the crappy ones at the end, right? It's fine.
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah, those are fine.
The ones where you're sitting in diapers anyway.
Something similar happened at the Charleston Classic this year with a very sudden need to clean up some Gatorade that was thrown around. And, it wasn't the facilities guys at CFC's fault, but they backed up over our fiber, and then it got stuck under the wheels of the very heavy stands that it was underneath that had been run behind. Nobody's fault. One person's fault, but nobody else mentioned here. But nobody on the facility, nobody on production. Just a very sudden need to clean up, and not a lot of happy crew in that moment. Well, Kevin, we really appreciate your time. Once again, he is Kevin Bilodeau, the head of sports. I've lost your title, so you can fill it in at WCSC Live 5 here in Charleston. Anything you want to plug, including your appropriate title.
Oh, I've got so much stuff. I'm sports director here at Live 5 in Charleston. There it is. You can find me at Kevin Live 5 on Twitter and Instagram. I have a couple podcasts of my own. I've got Electric Bilodeau, which focuses kind of on celebrities coming to Charleston and also sports here in Charleston as well. So we've got that. And then Palmetto Sports Daily, which I mentioned earlier. It's for sports people from around the state of South Carolina, just talking every day about what's going on in the state, whether it's Clemson, South Carolina, or here in Charleston. So subscribe to those, download those. And I don't care if you listen or not, just download them. That's fine. You can download and delete. That's fine.
I'm waiting for my invite to either one of them, quite frankly.
We don't have guests on Palmetto Sports Daily. And as soon as you headline a show at the music hall, I will get you on Electric Bilodeau.
All right. Well, now I know what to work for.
What
Kevin,
kind of music would you play?
Huh?
Easy.
What kind of music would you play?
What kind of music would I play? Come on, alternative. We all know that.
You look a punk pop kind of guy? Maybe some folk songs?
How are you? We're going to get DCMA'd for doing that. Great.
Yeah.
There goes any hope of making any money from this. That left a long time ago. Anyway, thank you again, Kevin. Thanks to Suze. Thanks to Dennis. I'm Nick Case. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sports Prod Pod. Good night, Satellite.